Yo guys, what's up? All right, this episode, we're jumping right into it. I just finished up the episode with Stephen Hunt. Amazing episode. We talked about business. We talked about life. We talked about personal development. You're gonna hear about his journey of building a $10 million portfolio, realizing it wasn't the right fit for him, going back, starting fresh on the drawing board, coming and building a business in property management, handling over $80 million in property. But ultimately, the most important thing he learned was checking in and seeing what's true for him. So watch this episode. I'll see you guys on the back end. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Oh, Steven, welcome back on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. This is great.
Yeah, dude, round two.
Yeah.
Now we're doing it in person, which I'm beyond grateful for. We've been like rescheduling this for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming, doing the workout with me, getting into cold plunge for the first time.
Yo, Marlon put me through the ringer, y'all. Yeah, I showed up. We went straight into a workout, did a cold plunge. This is my first cold plunge I've ever done, too. And that was like revitalizing.
Dude,
I feel great.
I'm glad you showed up with like the winning attitude though. Like you showed up, you're like, yeah, I'm on board. Let's make it happen.
Let's do it.
Stuck through the entire workout.
I totally forgot about the workout, by the way. Marlon told me about the workout, but I totally forgot. So I showed up in this shirt, and he's like, I got to change of clothes. Let's
when
do it.
I saw you with the polo shirt and like no bag, I'm like, oh, he totally forgot what we're about to do. But dude, like a champion, you show up, you get it done. And I'm excited today because last time I had you on the show, we were talking about you getting into the business. So you had left your job, you had you're doing sales.
Yep.
You'd left a job, you got into real estate. You and your wife, and you guys now have a kid. Congratulations.
So much has changed. Wow.
So a lot has changed. But you guys went from wholesaling to fixing and flipping to buying and holding to now actively growing a property management company where you guys are managing over $80 million in assets.
Yes,
which
it's crazy to say.
Nuts. So like, let's catch me up to speed on how that transition's been, because it's been about a year and a half since you were on the show.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So at that point in time, we were fixing and flipping a ton. We did a little bit of wholesale, and then we were primarily wanting to do buy and holds. And that was the biggest goal for us, was like, we got to hold as many properties as possible, because everything you see on TV, YouTube, wherever, right? It's like, hey, hold these properties. You're going to build wealth. You're going to get the cash flow, and you can retire, live on a beach, do all the awesome things, right? So I was like, this is what I have to do. And I think at that time we had just crossed like the $6 or $7 million in like properties held basically in our portfolio. And we cranked that all the way up to $10 million. So we were like growing this large portfolio. We're like, this is awesome, until it wasn't. Right. And then, so anybody that's a buy and hold investor knows what I'm talking about. Anybody that's trying to get into real estate, I hate to crush some dreams for you, but it's not what it's choked up to be. Right.
Tell them.
You need it for the wealth building. It's an absolute necessity. Yes, you should totally buy and hold, but the cash flow is fickle like a cat. Right.
So what you're saying is I can't retire at 28 years old with 10 properties?
Unfortunately, you can't. Unless you got such a crazy deal, right? So we started dialing it back a little bit. We sold some of our properties, but we were running into issues that we didn't know were going to be presented in front of us, which was vacancies coming through. We didn't realize how crazy that could be. All the repairs that were going to be made, just a lot of scenarios that come along with buy and holds, to where we were like, oh my gosh, we need to focus on active income. We need to find a way to make more money and not just focus on building this rental portfolio, because this is clearly not going to get us to where we need to be. I think we were at close to 20 properties that we were holding at that time. And it was just like, oh man, like I don't want to let any of these go either. But I'm not making any money. I'm losing money every single month now, because this house needed a new AC. This one needed new plumbing over here. Okay, now we have 3 vacancies in 3 of the houses. And all of a sudden, if you don't have a huge reserve and you don't have something built up for yourself at that point in time, you're putting yourself in a hole.
Well, we were just talking about this actually we did a live podcast 2 weeks ago, Sam and I, and it was titled "Why You Should Not Buy Rentals," and people were so thrown off by that, because if anyone's been following my story, they know I own rental properties. I have like a lot of Section 8, and they were surprised to hear me saying not to buy rentals. But it was more of a don't buy rentals until you're aware of this, right? Like a lot of people don't ever actually think about what happens after you close. Now you own the properties. There's an asset management aspect that comes into play.
Yeah.
That if you don't have a war chest, a large enough war chest of liquid cash to be able to take on this asset management, you can really get yourself in trouble, or it's just the dream's not passive.
Yes. And here's the other thing too, is people that get into the buy and holds, with everything you just said on top of that, they're not setting that money aside because they think they can live off of that money too. So we did that a little bit as well, where we were pulling, the cash flow that was coming through, and we'd be like, okay, let's treat ourselves. Like, we've worked hard. We have all these houses, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, something does go wrong. Where do I pull this money from? So now those are literally savings accounts now that we don't touch. That's my Dave Ramsey savings account where it's like, hey, here's the, don't do anything with it. Because when things go wrong, now we can just pull from that bucket. But we had to figure out different ways to create cash to come into the business.
Was there like a specific moment that happened? Was it like 3 ACs blowing at a time, or like a tenant that was just like totally like that you guys were like, okay, this strategy isn't the strategy right now?
Mm-hmm. Yep. This was, so right after my daughter was born, we had 3 houses that needed all new plumbing. And then we had 5 vacancies come up at the same exact time too, on top of those 3 houses that needed all that plumbing. And it was an incredible amount of money that we had to come out of pocket on.
Yeah.
And on top of this, rates had been going up. So we had a couple cash in refis. And then we found ourselves in this situation where we're like, wait, we have no liquidity. Like, we're all about leverage, right? We're real estate investors, but we're like, we have no liquidity, and we don't have access to any liquidity right now either, unless we decide to keep on taking more debt. And this was really, really tough because we had to make a conscious decision of, okay, I've just done a couple cool podcasts now where I'm like, I dropped the $10 million number. And as a dude, right? And some women also deal with this too, but dudes especially, we have egos that also come along with it. As much as some of us don't want to admit it, it's there. So I'm like, I've already said and committed to this number. I don't want to sell off some of these houses, but we ended up selling off some of the houses because we're like, we need to do what's right for us. And it took a moment to be like, who cares what other people think, what other people say? Like, I'm building a business, I'm building a legacy here. So I have to do what works for me right now. It doesn't mean I can't get back to that number. I tap the bell. I know I can do it, right? I have the confidence to know I can repeat that again if I need to. But at the end of the day, we need to make conscious, smart decisions.
Bro, you just gave me chills. Like, because, that's what it's about, though. Like, the fact that you're able to say, hey, you know what? I have to do what's right for me. And I totally get you. Like, the fact that you just said, like, guys, we have egos. I've absolutely been there in my business where I've been put on a pedestal because of achievement I've had in the past. And then I found myself in a new season where I'm like, I am drowning right now and I need help. And a part of me is not wanting to do the thing that needs to be done because it would go against the character that has been created up until this point. And that's a difficult thing to say, you know what, this is what's right for me. And I need to unplug from external validation. I need to unplug from the people who aren't actually living in my life to say this is what's right for my family. Yeah. This is what's right for my own ability to grow. So that's thinking long term. So shout out to you for being able to do that,
thank
man.
you. Yeah, it's tough to do. It is. For dudes especially, it's very, very, very tough to do because, like you said, you build this character. You're like, no, this is who I am, man. I've attached my identity to this. And that's one of my number one rules in business, even when I was in corporate America, is that I don't want to identify as anything. I don't want my identity to be attached to anything that I'm doing. I'm not the best medical sales rep out there. Like, I know people where they lose a job and it devastates them because it's like a piece of them left in that situation. And I had that moment of realization when we were selling off a little bit of the portfolio, which we built some of it back up, which is great. But at that moment, I remember sitting down and I was so upset about this because I'm like, I have to make a decision here if I'm going to sell these. And I looked at Angel and I was like, why am I identifying as the dude with a $10 million portfolio? That's not who I am. I need to do what's right for me. So let's get the identity out of here and let's focus on what works for us. And let's start doubling down on the things that we need to do so we can get out of the situation that we're in.
Bro, I gotta say, one of my favorite things about you, like, I just gotta say it right now because like, I'm just feeling it, is like your level of authenticity.
Oh, I appreciate that.
It's hard to have those conversations with a partner, with yourself. So the fact that you have those conversations with yourself, amazing. So you get to that stage where you're recognizing, like, all right, cool, like, we rung the bell of the $10 million portfolio. This is, by the way, 5 vacancies all at once. I mean, that's 5 mortgages. When I hear that, I was like, dude, that's 5 mortgages I got to pay all out of pocket. Then the ACs all out of pocket.
And most people don't think about that too, right?
No.
You're like, no, we're not in the hard money phase. We're not in the raising capital phase anymore. Like, things are set. We have long-term debt. Like, that's a $2,800 a month mortgage times 5.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of money. And every month that those aren't filled, you're like, ooh.
You feel it.
Yeah.
So you decided, okay, we have to create active income again. Like, we've got to, we've got to go out and we've got to make money. What did that conversation look like? And is that what ultimately brought you into the property management? Like, how did that transition happen?
Yep. So that conversation was exactly that. It's like, okay, we have to create more active income. Let's focus more on fix and flipping. Let's get this idea of holding on to every single property out of our heads. We were getting such good deals that we were like, why wouldn't we keep this? It's a perfect BRRRR, or it's a 0% interest seller finance. But now we look at everything as how much money we're going to make on this. And then after we flip 4 or 5 houses, now we can start considering, do we want to keep one more? Or can that money be used better somewhere else, right? Do we really need to have another rental right now? Because I'll be honest, for me, here's what I think this is where investors get it wrong a lot too, is that for me personally, I'm like, I'd rather have 10 free and clear properties that I can leverage against, that I know all that cash flow is coming through. If I have a vacancy, it's not costing me money. Yeah, I'm not making the extra money, but it's not hurting me in that meantime too. I'd rather have that than versus saying, oh, I have 1,000 doors, but I make $2,000 a month off of it.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that, you mentioned that one of your goals is ultimately a certain amount of free and clear houses. It wasn't about owning a certain amount of properties. It was owning properties free and clear. And like when I hear that, that's like, oh my gosh. Like
it's the baseline, dude.
You're speaking my language.
The baseline.
Yep.
So for me, I'm like, okay, that gets me out of the rat race. If I have 10 free and clear properties and that's bringing me in $30,000 a month of cash flow gross, which technically you're taking home because you don't have a mortgage going along with it, I'd much rather have that than say, oh yeah, I have 1,000 doors.
So
personally,
let me ask, what's the game plan for making that happen? Because you are still actively flipping. Is it that you look at, we're going to go and buy a property, and then as we flip, we're going to use flip profits to then cancel out any sort of debts we have on the property?
That's the goal right now. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm bringing it back to as well, as I was like, okay, we need to flip a lot more. And this past year, we've held on to almost no properties. I think we kept 1 property, but everything else has been a flip since then, because I want to take all those profits from the flips and I want to eliminate all the debt that's around us. So the first thing was, okay, it takes a lot of money to get to the size portfolio that we had. So we still had credit card debt. We still, we don't have all the capital right now to fix all these 3 ACs and all the plumbing that went wrong. So we were slapping these things on 0% interest credit cards. So we were like, let's eliminate all that debt. And then next we're eliminating all the mortgages. Now we have a free and clear portfolio. Our baseline is taken care of. Like we know now, no matter what, we're at that $30,000 a month mark, and we don't have to stress out about anything else. And now real estate and business becomes more fun. Yeah. Because it's not doing what you have to do. It's doing it because you want to do it.
Well,
right?
You bought yourself breathing room, and like that stress-free living. It's funny because I'm a fan of Kiyosaki. He taught me about leverage. He taught me financial literacy and taught me how to get into the deal. However, I'm also a fan of Dave Ramsey, and like people are like, well, you have to pick one or the other. I'm like, no, I could like both of them.
You can.
And like I always like to say, like I want like a Dave Kiyosaki approach to my business, to being able to go out and create that sort of, I don't have to worry anymore. So I love that that's your approach, that you're able to come from a, hey, if we do this correctly, we no longer have to worry. So now let me ask you this. The idea is go out and flip, then use the funds to cancel everything out. You also have a property management company as well. Where the heck did that come from? Because one day like that just like, it felt like that just like appeared randomly, but then it's been crushing since.
It's been going really good. It's awesome. So the property management side, I've always wanted to have a property management business because it fits into the business model that I like, which is the same thing with the rentals. It's the monthly reoccurring revenue model.
Yep.
So for me, I was like, I always want to have a property management business, but in the state of Arizona, you need to be a licensed agent for like 3 years, 2-3 years basically, before you can actually become a legit property manager. And I was like, I don't want to go get my real estate license right now, and I don't really have an intention of wanting to wait 2 to 3 years to make that happen. But man, I would love to have a property management business. How cool would that be? So my best friend at the time, he still is my best friend, was actually my property manager, and he'd been in property management for about 7 years. And I'd been having a lot of these mindset talks that you and I have all the time, right? With him, pushing him. I'm like, oh man, one day we're going to have a property management business. One day we're going to do it. You can do it. You got it. And one day he calls me and he goes, hey, I've had enough. I quit. I'm starting a property management business. And this is just randomly, like this is right after our podcast that we did together, like 3 months after it. It was March of 2023. Yeah, March of 2023. And I'm like, well, hold on, dude. Come over to my house. I want to talk to you about this. And I created a whole slideshow, like PowerPoint presentation of what the property management business is going to be called, all this stuff, like pitching him to be like, partner up with me. Like I have the network of people. I'll make sure we're always filled with the business. Yeah. I just can't be a property manager. I can't do the things that you can do. You have the skill set that I need to make this a thing, but I know all the people that you need to grow this business. So it became this like symbiotic, cohesive thing. And we're like, all right, let's go for it. Let's do it. And let's bring something new to the table that we're not really finding in the marketplace right now. A pain point that a lot of investors have. And I knew this pain point because I was buy and holding, right? And that's, hey, interest rates just went up. almost nothing cash flows as a long-term rental right now. And then the other side of this was, okay, so we have to go for multiple exit strategies. If I want to do short-term rentals, I have to go to a different property manager usually. If I want to do midterm rentals, I have to go to a different property manager. There was no property management businesses that were bringing everything together in one place to where you could essentially have a consultant that you go to that gets you the highest and best use on your property.
And I love that, by the way, because you guys do that. And like your property management company is HABU.
HABU, highest and best use property management.
Which I love because you're solving your own problem there, and then you're able to bring it to the marketplace. And that makes sense because I genuinely was curious. I knew you had the property management company. We started talking after it formed, but I never knew the origin story. And like I love the fact that like it's your buddy, he's like, hey, I'm about to quit. And you're like, no, let's revitalize this.
Let's do it different.
And so now as you've jumped into it and now you're on the side of essentially easing the pain that other landlords feel, you know, what's it like to be able to serve those people? And like, what are you finding that is, what's working well? Like what's working well for people if they wanted to hold property?
Right now, what I'm seeing working well in terms of like what's performing the best type of working well, what's performing the best right now is we do something called a hybrid model, which is where we do a combination of midterm and short term. If it's up to me, I'm like, I try to push everybody into long term if their property works for a long term. I'm like, trust me, it's the least amount of headache, it's the least amount of turnover, it's the least amount of risk and things breaking within the house. However, if we're looking to maximize revenue, in most cases where we see the best is right now the midterm and short-term side of it. And we do a hybrid model where we're listing everything as a short-term rental. And then once we find the perfect midterm candidate, which most people are trying to search for a midterm person and they have a vacancy for a month or two.
Yeah.
Because they're like, man, I want somebody to come in here and pay me double market rent for, you know, the next 6 months to a year. And I'm like, those don't come around all the time. So let's make money in the meantime. So we run them as a short term and then a midterm if we need to. And since we have now a large portfolio that we're managing, we can actually shift and pivot these people around. So we get a lot of inquiries. We keep everything listed at all times, every property, no matter what. So we can go and pull from somebody that's in Phoenix and say, actually, we have another house in Glendale that we can get you at the same exact rate. It's just 5 minutes down the road. Would you be open-minded to that instead? Because now we basically are using these properties for marketing. So we have a constant tenant flow and lead flow.
And what I like about you is you guys are local and you've really started to niche down and understand your marketplace extremely well. Where I've seen you like on going out, like you recently did a video with Kevin. And you guys were walking a deal that you both were competing to buy, and then he ended up getting it.
Yeah.
But like just watching how your mind was creatively looking at the space and saying, hey, it could actually be used like this, like truly highest and best use.
Yeah.
Like, did you even consider that? Most people don't think about that. Most property management companies, they unfortunately just take orders, and they're taking orders from landlords who don't really understand how to best utilize their own property. So the fact that you come in and you can actually see and suggest this is a better way to use the property.
I use, there's a scene in the Batman movie with Heath Ledger from back in the day. I say this quote all the time where he goes, the dog always wants to catch the mailman, but the dog doesn't actually know what to do with the mailman once he gets him. And that's how I view investors when it comes to properties, because people call us and they're like, I got this deal. I got this property. I just bought it. Now what? I don't know what to do with it now that I have it. Like, how do I make sure I'm making as much money? How do I know I'm making the right decision? Like, is this really what I need to do to make the most amount of money? So that's been really fun. And I get to have these high level conversations every day with investors. So my whole network gets to be investors that I talk to all day long. And then it gets to go over to Drew and he gets to make that magic happen on the back end for them, you know?
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. I love that. So let me ask you this, because I know for the people who are listening that are real estate guys and gals, they're trying to figure out, how do we find good deals right now, though? Because I remember a year and a half ago, you were niching down and getting some sick deals. Like, I understood why you were buying them, because you really were getting some deep deals.
Yeah.
And you were doing something that no one else was doing. Are you still getting deals the same way that you were a year ago?
They come in here and there. Here was the hard part with that methodology. And just to kind of give a quick recap to anybody, the way that I was getting my deals is that I was going to assisted living communities and I was going to hospitals and I was networking with all of their case managers, their social workers, because seniors in America, over 60% of seniors in America don't have $1,000 to their name. And 60% of that 60 whatever percent population wouldn't know where to find $400 if they needed it. Crazy. So if something broke, I mean, these people are broke, unfortunately. However, they're technically the wealthiest generation out there because they are house rich. They bought these houses for $20,000, $30,000 back in the day, and they haven't paid off. but the house might be in shambles, whatever the case may be. So when they're transitioning over to assisted living or into the hospital because they're no longer have the health to be staying at home by themselves anymore, they need help in those situations to get from home over to the assisted living community. So I created a business to where I would go to those companies and say, hey, send those people to me. I'll transition them. I'll handle everything. I'll maximize their equity. I'll make sure that they get what they need. So that way they could basically get the care that they deserve.
Yeah.
Otherwise, these people are literally sitting in the hospital for a year, 2 years at a time because they don't have the money. They can't leave and nobody's there to help them, right? So that's where we were getting a lot of our deal flow, just to give, some perspective to everybody.
And because you guys tapped into it was like such like a little bit of a unicorn market out here. Like it was really, you had a blue ocean and you guys were crushing it. And you did a phenomenal job at that, by the way. Like it wasn't a lazy approach I was just like amazed. It's like, damn, Steven is such a professional. That's how I was blown
appreciate
away.
that.
Seriously, man. Like you were one, like most of my friends I was watching do this business. I was like, all right, these are just like a bunch of guys like at home in sweatpants doing deals. And you were just approaching it totally different. I was like, okay, this guy's doing this truly as a business.
A business solution is the way that we were looking at this is, okay, yes, here's this problem for seniors, but also what problem does that present to the business that's trying to work with the seniors, right? So the assisted living communities took them on average 6 to 9 months to convert for their wholesale cycle, 6 to 9 months. When somebody walks in the door and says, my mom needs to move in here, it takes 6 to 9 months on average for them to complete that wholesale cycle. And we shorten that down to 2 weeks. So that is, when you're talking about a conversion cycle there, it's a no-brainer for them to work with us. It's just it takes a lot of labor. It takes a lot of being in front of people, consistently staying in front of them. It's like a game of musical chairs when it comes to these companies because people switch roles. People don't stay at their jobs forever. So you constantly have to be out there in front of them and networking and making sure they know who you are. And that's where things fell off for us a little bit is because we had our daughter. I wasn't going out there as much because I was the guy that was going out there doing all the promoting. I was doing all the fix and flips. I was doing the project management myself. So we've really spent these past year and a half insulating ourselves with people that can help us and not worrying as much about how much are we making on every single deal that we're doing. So we partnered up with Ingrid on the senior community stuff now. And she has been awesome, and we're getting her really just tied into that world right now, so that way she can be out there because she's, Ingrid, right?
You couldn't have had a more perfect person for it. Like
networking queen.
Will literally talk to everyone. She knows everyone. You meet someone new, turns out she knows that person's on that runs the taco truck, who's parked at the...
She could hear one person that has some sort of connection to that industry too and be like, oh my gosh, what about Sally? Because Sally knows Ben and Ben knows this guy and this guy. And she'll
my
somehow
mind how she keeps that Rolodex in her head. And I'm like, you're insane.
I'm like, just be yourself and go out there and get to know everybody in this industry, right? So we're trying to figure out that kind of stuff. We hired a project manager, Anna Martinez. So now I don't have to go to the projects every single day. Now we can actually start taking a look at the business itself and go, where do I need to move the next chess piece so we can get to the next level? And that's how I'm trying to approach all of our businesses now is let's get the money out of the way. Let's not think about the money. How do we make sure that these things are growing and start to operate themselves so that none of us have to be a part of them anymore?
I love that. So you're building the infrastructure and you're recognizing hey, whatever it costs to build this, let's just get it built. It doesn't matter if we got to cut out, pay someone else some more, put the money over here because you understand once it's built, now it can start to pump.
100%.
I love that, man. That's it's like Amazon, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you look at these big companies, it used to boggle my mind why a company would go into debt for so many years. You would hear Tesla's doing, billions of dollars in sales, but they're like, we have no profit. I'm like, wait, what? And I would see, this company is building an infrastructure.
That's all it is. So the most successful companies in the world, by the way, come from Japan. So the Japanese, and they have a certain way that they actually build their companies is that they don't take profit for the first 3 years. Everything has to go back into the business. So with the property management business, it's been growing rapidly, lots of exponential growth going on there. And it's awesome to look at the balance sheet and be like, whoa, this is sick. This is going, this is moving. But I'm not paying myself from there. And I don't intend to pay myself for at least the first 2 years.
Yep.
Just because I'm like, no, I'm like, if there's an extra $5,000, $10,000 a month left over for me to pay myself, why am I not hiring people around me? So that way we have everybody taken care of. Now this business, if I'm gone for the next 3 weeks, is still growing. We still have inquiries coming in. We're still getting comps out. Everything's still moving. And I don't have to be there. That's the goal.
So are you familiar with Dan Martell?
Yes, buy back your time.
Amazing book.
He's phenomenal.
Phenomenal guy. Like, I actually want to sit down and meet him. I haven't met him in person yet. I want to meet him eventually. Sure, will happen. If someone can make that happen, make
Yes.
that happen, please. Steven and I would both like to have dinner with Dan Martell, so if you
Yeah.
can make that happen.
What's your favorite restaurant, Dan Martell? I'll pay for it.
So his concept, though, of don't grow the business for the sake of growing the business, grow the business for the sake of getting back your time. And I love what you're saying right there. If there's money in here that can allow you to hire somebody new, that allows you to stay in another seat, another chair, that lets you be in the owner's chair, that lets you
Yes.
continue to think higher level, that lets you continue to build, that's the way to grow the business.
It's very interesting what you just said too, because you'll run into people all the time that are around you where they're like, why would you want to partner up? Like, I do a lot of fix and flip partnering with Ingrid, right? Almost every single fix and flip now I do with Ingrid.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, why would you want to do that? Like, you could make that 50K profit on your own. You already know how to flip. You already know how to raise the money. You already know how to do all the things. Like, why would you want to split that money? Like, is it that much harder for you? And I'm like, it's not that it's hard. It's just that it doesn't feel hard at all when I have Ingrid on my side, and it doesn't feel hard for Ingrid when I'm on her side. So if we have this symbiotic relationship, if we could do double, triple the volume we were going to do before, and it doesn't feel hard, why would we not go that way? Same thing on the property management side of it. If it's not going to feel hard, like, why would we not build the people around us? Now I get to do fix and flips, buy and holds, have a property management business, do the next business, because we all have what we need, right?
Well, you know, you're self-aware. And so that's kind of where I want to drive this conversation now too. It's like your level of self-awareness, being able to say, you know what, like, although I'm maybe making the same amount of money or even less by bringing a partner on, energetically, effort-wise, before doing this on my own, I'm putting in 9 out of 10 effort. Doing it with Ingrid, I'm putting in 2 out of 10 effort. In fact, this thing is recharging my batteries because now I'm hanging out with my friend. We're having fun. We're goofing around. We're making content. We're getting burritos after. Why would I not do this? Your ability to assess that and have that level of self-awareness, was that something that was always there, or was that something that got developed as time went on?
Heck no, it wasn't always there. Are you joking? Oh my gosh. No, it is something that I've actively worked on, and I still actively work on, and you should always be actively working on. Now, my wife, who was on the last podcast, Angel, we are very both self-aware people because we make it a point to analyze every situation. Some people say we're calculated, right? But I think there's a benefit to that. I don't think that's a negative. I think there's a huge pro to that because every situation that we leave, if it was just hanging out with our really good friends and we were all just cutting loose, right? Or we just got back from a really big business meeting, whatever it was, we still break down everything. We break down the tonality that somebody used and the way that it made us feel and the way that it made the other person feel. And we watch the way other people communicate because we want to be aware of how are we interacting with everybody around us. Okay, so that person took that as a negative. How could you shift that into a positive instead? So we're constantly doing that game, almost to the point where it's like sickening.
That's cool. So you guys are like leaving,
every night.
So you guys like leave a barbecue and like you're in the car and it's like, it's not, oh, like what did the Joneses do? Like, I can't believe he's doing that. It's more of, hey, did you see the way, you know, Susan interacted with Tiffany and how it kind of hurt? You guys are having those kind of conversations.
100%. Yeah.
That's freaking awesome.
It's the interpersonal communication to us that we're like, okay, why did this person react that way? Okay, is it something with them or was it because something else? Like, looking at everybody's perspective. Why did they perceive it like this? Because we want to make sure that we're most authentically ourselves, but we're self-aware enough too in every situation to be able to read the room and be like, okay, I can tell this person doesn't feel great about the things that I'm saying. How do I redirect my message or shift my message so that way I can be more towards this person, right?
So I'm curious to know for you, do you ever have now, you know, because what's interesting is people will watch and see where you're at now and they think, all right, great, Steven's like experiencing all the success. Everything must start coming easy to him. Do you still have times where it is hard to show up authentic? And in those moments, if they do occur, what do you do? What works for you to help remind yourself or bring yourself back to showing up authentically?
That's a really good question. So this piece of advice was given to me by Angel's stepdad, and it's one of the best pieces of advice, and it's not anything like crazy, but he goes, you have to keep your give a shit gauge on 0. And I know everyone always laughs and I'm like, okay. And that's how I found I can keep myself the most authentic because anytime I start to get stressed out, worked up, feel like I'm getting overwhelmed, I have to keep my give a shit gauge on 0, right? Not to the point where I don't care about anything, but to the point of like, am I going to die? Is this really going to hurt somebody? Is this really going to affect somebody? Like what's really going on here at the core of this? What is my worst case scenario? Like, is it that bad, truly, the situation that I'm in? And just remembering that and being like, okay, cool. Well, let's make a list now, right? Let's make a list and say what's most urgent, what needs to be done, but what ones do I want to do as well? So let's knock out a few of my urgent ones and let's do some things that I want to do so that way I can recharge myself and revitalize myself. Like, I'll go through phases where I'm like, I don't want to do the accounting. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this next task. I'd really like to be working on editing this YouTube video or putting this content out or do this. So I'll knock out a couple urgent things. All the other tasks that aren't as urgent, those can stay for tomorrow. But then let's move over to something that gives me life. So that way I can still just give me that split, you know?
So I like that. So effectively, it sounds like you've learned how to, and I'm paraphrasing, you've learned how to let the fires burn and not stress out about it. Right? Let the building be on fire for a little bit longer. And hey, we'll come back and we'll put that fire out in a moment.
I think a lot of people get way too focused on the fact that the building's on fire for way too long. And I have this conversation with Drew, my partner in property management, all the time. And he's like, oh, I don't want this person to get this bad experience because we couldn't get this property filled or whatever the case is. And I'm like, have you done everything you can do? Is it listed on every single platform? Have you communicated with them? Have you done all the things? If they need to leave, they need to leave. If we weren't the right fit, we weren't the right fit. Like, keep your give a shit gauge low. You did everything you could. It doesn't mean keeping your give a shit gauge, by the way, doesn't mean that you don't care about anything in life. It's just like, hey, let's like not stress out.
Right.
Like, we can't think clearly if we're stressing out about what's going on. Let's try to look at this whole picture. If you did everything you could up to this point, so be it.
But I love that, the fact that you're asking, hey, did we do what we could do?
Right.
And after all you could do has been done, it is now time to release, and the outcome's really not in our hands anymore.
Right.
Our job is to go out and sow. We got to plant seeds, but at the end of the day, I'm not the one that grows the crop. Right. Like the crop grows on its own. I don't do that. I come back for the harvest.
Yep.
Right. My job is to put the seeds down, come back and do the harvest. The in between, it ain't up to me.
Nope.
So I absolutely love that, man.
Hey, exactly right.
So with that, I want to also know from you, now that you're getting, and we were talking about this briefly before the podcast started rolling, and we talked about this in the past, the power of network, power of getting around different communities, different people. As you're growing, what sort of rooms are you actively looking to put yourself in now? Because you're starting to recognize the rooms that got you to this point maybe aren't serving at the same level. And I think people kind of it's interesting. I come across people that as the rooms they got into now help them get to where they are, and they love where they are. But now they're starting to feel a plateau again. They're starting to feel stagnant. And they are not realizing, hey, the same old rooms that used to make you feel stagnant, this new room has become a same old room because you've gotten the value from it. So it's time to go look for a new room. What rooms are you beginning to look for yourself?
Ah, man, that's also a really good question, and that's tough. So we did the boardroom. That's one of the ones that you and I had talked about. That's a mastermind led by Kent Clothier, and that was awesome because I got to see people that were doing numbers that I hadn't even considered doing in my head. I was like, wait a minute, you're 36 years old and you're doing $9 million a month in revenue? And there's a 70% profit margin on that? And I'm like, that is what? How did you do that? So we got to enter some really cool rooms like that to where I'm like, wow, this is really making me elevate the way I need to start thinking, how big I really want to start going on things. But the other side of that too is finding rooms to where I'm recharged is another thing. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that is, okay, where do I start connecting with people? Because when I go into these business rooms, it's easy to get sucked into the vortex of business, growth, business growth. And all of a sudden now you start losing your ability to be authentic to yourself in other situations that are outside of business, when it comes to your family, when it comes to your friends, the things that recharge you.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm also looking for, okay, how do I surround myself now with people that are authentically themselves? We're not all just focused on the growth and there's no substance underneath it all because we're just business and growth. How do I find the people that have those two things, the business and growth, but also just authenticity?
You know, it's funny. I love that you say that because that's one of the realest answers I've heard about this question. I was just hanging out with a gentleman up in Scottsdale last weekend, and that's where he's at in life right now. He's like, dude, business, it was like, we're crushing, right? We're doing 7-figure months. We're absolutely crushing. The team's scaling, everything's growing. He's like, but I'm looking for rooms where I can go and have genuine relationships.
It's hard.
And have experiences. I want to go on an adventure. I want to gain life experience. I want to build my life resume. And I don't just want to talk business now. He's like, I already have the rooms to talk business in. We're the people who are also at this level in business, in mindset, but are also looking to just do life. And that is something I think people forget
It's
about.
exhausting when you only focus only on the business, because you find yourself trying to reconnect with friends or make new friends, and you're like, I'm struggling to be present. I'm struggling to even enjoy my time hanging out with you, and I want to open up and I want to be this way with you, but it's like I feel like I can only talk about business. You know, I feel like this is the only lane now that I'm in, so I'm trying to shift away and be like, okay, this is a cool, nice to have in my personality bucket, you know what I mean? But I want to still be like, who am I? Who do I want to serve? Who do I want to be around that I can enjoy myself with,
Yeah.
right? And because if you're just focused on the business and the growth, you're always on in that mode. And then it's really, really, really tough. You'll notice all of your relationships around you start to kind of dwindle and go away because you're not maintaining those things, you know?
Yeah, you're not
That's
pouring
tough.
into people the way that you should be if you want to
And that
grow.
feels empty, unfortunately. You know, you can almost compare it to if you're a dude that's a player, right? And you're like, I want to go get the next girl. I want to go get the next girl type of thing. But after a while, you're like, man, I kind of just want somebody to be there for me.
Right.
Like,
You want to grow it. You want to actually have something meaningful. You want to have depth.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this. I got 3 more questions here for you.
Yeah.
And this question is one of my favorite ones. And in fact, this one was inspired while we were doing the Run Across America. We're coming across a lot of people who would come and
Just so
join
cool,
us.
by the way. Literally one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Dude, it was a blast of a time. And so when people would join us, I was meeting a lot of different strangers out who just saw what we were doing on social media. They came out to run. And I enjoyed asking them this question, which is, over the last 12 months, you know, we're constantly having life experiences. We're growing as people. You're growing as a father, as a husband. What's been one of the greatest lessons you've learned in the past 12 months personally?
Oh, wow. To start letting go of the certain expectations that I have of myself, that if I don't, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, I tapped the bell and I had to shift my mindset to, cool, I tapped the bell, so that should give me the confidence that I know I can do it now, versus sitting there and going, man, what's everyone going to think of me? I'm not that guy. I'm not who I thought I was. And you start dogging on yourself on a lot of it. I think that's been definitely one of them there, is just reshifting everything.
I like that. And like being able to let go and like just kind of give yourself grace.
That is the word. Grace is the word. Yeah. Just give yourself grace, and giving everybody around you grace too. As the other thing, as entrepreneurs, it's really easy to start pointing fingers as well as to why things aren't going right. But just giving those people that grace as well, and being like, hey, it's okay if you made those mistakes. Like, let's learn from this. Let's grow from this. Let's all become better. I would have made those mistakes if I were you as well. So let's all just focus on getting better. And then that starts to really create a culture of people around you. And this is what's really cool now, is that I'm seeing with everybody that I get to work with every single day, with Drew, with Kim, with all the people that work at the property management, with Ingrid, with my wife, is that I'm seeing that shift for everybody, where everybody feels comfortable to show up authentically as themselves and just try their best, and just know that, okay, if things go wrong, it's okay, because we're here, we're growing, we're doing this together, and we get the opportunity to do this together, right?
Yeah, I got authenticity. One of the greatest gifts I think you can give, not just yourself, but to other people.
Yes.
Because you showing up authentic gives them permission and lets them say, hey, it's also okay for you to show up authentically. And we're all just figuring this out. In fact, I just I did a Zoom call this morning, and we were doing like a sales training with about 80 people or so on the call. Nice. And I started the call off by saying, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I do not have it all figured out. I'm making mistakes every single day. In fact, I probably have maybe 10% of this stuff figured out, and the other 90% I am winging it. Like, we are just winging it.
Right.
And they were just like, is he supposed to be saying that? Like, you're the dude leading the call right now. And I'm like, oh my God, I just want to be honest with you. Like, I don't know everything. I don't know what's going on half the time, but I am willing to take action. I'm willing to show up authentically, and I'm willing to ask for help now, which is something I wasn't willing to do in the past.
100%.
So
I fully agree with that.
Love that, man.
It's funny because I've done other podcasts where people, they want me to break down things step by step. Well, how do I do this? Well, how does this work? Okay, then what do you have to? I'm like, I don't have the formula. I'm like, I'm doing the best I can with what I got. And that's all we're doing here. That's all anybody in business is doing. And when you have that mindset shift in business too, where you're like, wait a minute, there is no rule book. Like that's the part that I think people miss a lot of the time. I was like, there's no step-by-step rule book. It's like you're showing up every day, doing the best you can with what you got, and then eventually it's going to turn into something because you stayed consistent and you just stayed on top of it, right? I check in with everybody that I get to work with. And I'm like, where does it hurt? Show me where the pain is, right? Let's try to figure out that problem. Like, it's just one small problem at a time, and you just every day you're looking for the next problem to solve, and eventually you're like, wait a minute, this is a business. This is working. This is going.
It's like raising a kid.
Yeah,
it's funny. I gotta say this, and you know this. I was down in Puerto Rico with Ingrid and the Nortons, and we were doing. I was the only dude. This is funny. I was the only single dude at a couples retreat. So it was 12 couples and Marlon. So the 25 of us were having a great time. And what was interesting, we're talking about family dynamic and business dynamic and how similar they truly are.
Yeah.
And how building your business and building your family are so identical in the sense that people can give you advice and there's suggestions and there's frameworks of what's worked in the past, but everyone's business and everyone's kids and everyone's family dynamics are going to require you to simply show up every day and figure out and put out those problems as they occur, as they come up. And you just have to remain adaptable and remain open to doing it, but you got to show up authentically.
Oh, 1,000%.
You got to deal with the problems that are actually there.
1,000%. And the problems that are here today aren't going to be the same problems tomorrow. What you're dealing with in your personal relationship today is going to be different, right? Angel and I used to have roles. Like, this is such a small thing, but like we had roles in the household of like, you do this, you do the laundry, you do the dishes, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And we just had to talk about this like 3 weeks ago. We're like, I don't think those roles work anymore. I'm like, we gotta like, let's just ex-nay the roles and like, let's figure something else out that works for us, because that worked when we were both corporate America people. But now we're so busy. We have all these different things going on. We have a daughter where it's like, no, we need to be more of a team on every single chore that we have going on together within our household, and figure out ways to connect in different ways now too, because we used to be able to go on the walks every single night. We used to do all these things to where it's so few and far between that we get those opportunities to connect. It's like if you have to pivot in anything in life, whether it's business or your personal relationships, you just do, but you show up authentically and you talk about it and you communicate about it with anyone in any scenario.
I love that. Also, by the way, guys, you need to, this is your first time watching Steven, you need to go back and listen to the podcast that we did a year and a half ago where you guys and Angel talked about your vision walks, and that was one of the most impactful episodes ever. So I'm going to make sure I put like a little card somewhere on the screen for people to do that.
Yeah.
I want to know now this, and it's funny, I've asked you this question in the past. I do not remember your answer. So if you give me the exact same answer, we'll find out later, which is books. Books changed my life entirely. They're still constantly changing my life. I have books that I read, that I reread. I have books that I read, when the answers are needed. But I want to know for you, what has been 1 to 2 books that have been total game changers, whether it's been entirely in your life or just within the last year?
Great question, man. Every time this question gets asked to me too, I'm always like, what were the books? I'm like, because you stay so consistent on like, I want to read the next book. I want to take as much information. I always have to give honorable mention of it being Rich Dad Poor Dad, because it's
a classic.
You can't not, it was less impactful for me. It was more impactful for Angel. And that was still a huge impact for us, because at that point in our life, I was like, vision. Like, we got to become rich. We got to do all these things. Like, we got to get into real estate. And I couldn't really communicate why to Angel. So I was like, no, just trust me. Like, just trust me. I know we just got to do this thing, but I don't know how to explain it to you, but like, just trust me. She's like, I don't know about that. And I was like, will you please read this book? I just finished reading it and it was great. But I think it'll be impactful for you. And she read the whole thing in one day. And that changed the dynamic in our relationship too, almost immediately. Because she's like, I get what you're saying now. Now this makes sense to me. Like, this was huge. So sometimes it wasn't even a book that I read. It was a book that my wife read, to where I'm like, cool, this connected so many dots for you, to where we get to connect more and we can start driving in this correct direction.
That, by the way, I gotta say that's powerful right there, because oftentimes I think people won't do something like that. They'll read the book and then they will constantly keep trying to explain it to their partner, versus letting their partner hear it from the book or hear it from the author or hear it from somebody else. And I think that will help a lot of partnerships, not just intimate relationships, but even business partnerships.
1,000%.
Is being able to let your partner go and get the information from the source. so then you can both come together and talk about it.
Yep.
Powerful.
I totally agree with that. I do it all the time with Drew in my property management business, right? I'm like, hey, I need you to find this information. Like, I can't tell you, because it's almost like, when it's a friend or it's your parent, for example, even, right? It's like, yeah, they tell you that information, but it's like until you have the aha moment yourself and you're sitting there by yourself and you're like, wait a minute, I get it. This makes sense now. You just don't soak it in the same way. It just doesn't happen. So yeah, we talk about that stuff all the time, and we're always trying to feed each other, all of us.
And then outside of the Kiyosaki book, any other book that stood out to you? Because by the way, like I'm a huge fan of like Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books. I reread that book probably once a year.
Really?
It reframes me. Like it gets my mind. Every time I reread that book, I do leave with this sense of I need more assets.
Yeah.
I need to own more assets.
Rereading it for me, it brought a lot of things to light too, because there was so much terminology in that book that I didn't understand before, where I was like, okay, sure, yeah, you just make it happen, sure. Like there was one, it's like not I can't, but how can I, right?
Yep.
And I was like, that's great. How can I? Like, but truly, like, how can I? Like, how can I do what you just said in this book? And now being in real estate and doing business consistently, I'm like, I totally like putting this into play makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
I would say another great book was probably, it's probably be a sales book. Here's one that I'll also give a mention to that I didn't think I was gonna like.
Honorable mention.
It's the Wolf of Wall Street's book. It's The Way of the Wolf is what it's called. That's a sales book, and I wanted to hate it so bad. This is like I was on my huge sales binge for so long, but The Way of the Wolf really, for me, I was like, wow, this was fantastic. And you have to listen to it on audio. If anybody's listening, you have to listen to it on audio so you can hear his tonality. But that was a life changer for me, or game changer for me, because it was one of those first books where the author was reading the sales book. It wasn't some old dude that sounded like Gandalf on a pre-recorded, how to win friends and influence people. Like they're always like, I'm like, okay, I'm like getting through it. This was Jordan Belfort actually reading his own book, so I could hear his voice inflections, and I could hear the way he was saying things. And even though not all of them lined up with the way I wanted to do things, I was like, wait, now I'm seeing it. Like now I'm hearing it. Now I'm getting it. I can visualize what this actually means and why you're saying those things. So I will say that one also had a huge impact. As much as I didn't want it to, it was probably one of the most impactful sales books I ever read.
That's the first time I've gotten that recommendation, so I'm definitely going to go pick that up on like Audible
I told
today.
that to Steve Trang too, and he was like, yeah, me too. He's like, I did not want to like that book. He goes, but it was pretty darn good.
Damn. All right, so that book's being added to the library.
Oh
tonight.
yeah, and then the classics, always How to Win Friends and Influence People. Think and Grow Rich. All those.
I love that. So then let me ask you this final question, and hopefully you don't remember this question when I asked it to you, because I would be curious to see if your answer has changed over time, which is one of my favorite questions to ask. Tomorrow morning you wake up, and as you start to come to, you are a blank slate. You don't remember any of the books you've read. You don't remember the conversations that you and Angel have had, the vision walks. You don't remember any of the experience of flipping, buying and holding, building out the portfolio. It is all gone. All memories are wiped. However, you're not freaking out. Like you're not in a Saw movie. You're not scared for your life. You're just coming to. A thought starts to come to your mind, and that thought lands in your mind, and you accept it 100% as truth. No one will ever be able to convince you otherwise that this is true, like that this is not true. So this is going to form the rest of everything else that comes after. What would you ideally prefer this first thought to be?
There's power in kindness. That would be my first thought that I'd want to come to me.
Nice.
There's power in kindness. So when I started my Instagram journey back in like high school, right? This is like when Instagram got launched. That was the quote that I put on there, and I put it on my Facebook too at the time. I think I was a sophomore in high school. And there's power in kindness, and I live by that in everything that I do. And if there was any quote that I wanted to give to my daughter that I want myself to remember forever, is that there's power in kindness. And that's how I truly approach everything in life, with that message in the back of my head. Because if I give you my all and I'm kind to you, and I am authentically just a good person to you and I'm kind, and you decide to screw me over, that's on you. That is what it is. So be it. But if I was kind to you and you return the kindness, that's awesome. I've made a friend, right? So just always be kind in every situation, no matter what. That's my biggest thing that I ever want to live by.
I love that answer. Steven,
Oh,
for the
thank
people
you.
that want to connect with you, that are like listening and they're like, all right, again, I like this dude. I want to connect with him, especially if they've got properties here local in Arizona and they want to have you manage because
Yes.
they see like your heart, they see where your head's at. How can they connect with you? What's the best way to get a hold of Steven?
The best way to get a hold of me is always going to be through Instagram. So message me on Instagram. It's at Steven Hunt, StevenHunt. I got that too because I was one of the first ones to Instagram, which is great. So I don't have any abbreviations in there. So it's at Steven Hunt, and that's the best way to communicate with me is through Instagram because I love to just go through my messages on there and interact with people and see what people look like. Texting, I'm a little all over the place, as you can imagine, I'm sure. I have constant calls coming in for property management, but also from the flips, from everything. So I just, sometimes I get delayed and I go with what's most urgent, like I said before, right? What's the most urgent things to handle? Whereas it's a little bit more pleasurable for me to start answering things when it comes to Instagram.
I love that. And guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Steven's details and Instagram and everything in the show notes below. So go ahead, click on it. Be sure to give Steven a follow. Dude, thank you so much for coming out here.
It's so good to be back.
Man,
it is
I
so
appreciate
good.
you.
The next time we got to bring Angel back out too.
Oh, 100%.
That'll be good.
Dude, people are going to go nuts for that episode.
1000%.
So guys, we'll see you on the next episode. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Or if you have any questions for Steven, we'll get him back on the podcast and we'll have him bring his wife, Angel.